Welcome back. We had an excellent session before. I think we're going to have a tremendous session now. We are, as I said, going into territory which is my part of the world. I'm from the US, but I think it's a very interesting topic, which is political initiation in Western democracies, specifically US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Netherlands, France, etc. And we have two speakers who have a wide range of interests, and obviously we'll let them tell you a little bit about themselves rather than me talking about their biography. By the way, the speaker biographies are all in the package. I don't know if you've gotten a package, but it's all in the package. Um, but like the format that we had before, we're going to have enough time for a discussion, which means questions and answers and interaction, hopefully, that gives everybody a chance. But this should really be a good uh, perspective because the West is a little bit different than I would say from the rest of the world. Uh, and it would be really interesting to see two parts of the world. Uh, is New Zealand Pacific or Atlantic or what? Pacific, right? You talking about way Pacific and then U.S. way out this side. You are on the Atlantic side. Atlantic side, on the East Coast side. So I know this gentleman here because we do some work together. But anyway, I'll turn this over to Mr. Bindra, who will kick this off. He has a unique distinction of being the first MP from New Zealand, and also the unique distinction of having to see some struggles of technology here. It took us a little while, but please, Mr. Bindra.
नमस्कार मेरा नाम महेश बिंद्रा है और मैं न्यूजीलैंड का मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट हूँ. I can see that some of you may not be able to understand the Hindi that I speak. So what I'll do is I'll mix and match and try and please everybody, because that's what is democracy all about. So I'll give you a brief introduction of myself and how I got initiated into active politics rather than from being a Karyakarta or a young volunteer at the age of 14 years. At the age of 14 years, I started my little contribution or little work with the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, and I never make any apologies for that. A brief introduction of myself and my background. Born in Mumbai, went to Mumbai University, studied political science and psychology, did an honors degree, but it took about 35 years to get those honors in the parliament. So now, while I was studying political science and psychology in Bombay University, Mumbai University, used to be Bombay and now it's Mumbai. So I also got trained for the Indian Army Commission, the commission in the Indian Army, but I didn't take that commission. This was in 1978. Instead, I joined the Vigilance and Security Department of Air India, and I was a fraud prevention officer for a while. This is technology at work. So I went to New Zealand about 12 years ago. And before that, before going to New Zealand, I lived and worked in Mumbai. Have been a very active member of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. And I also had something to do with the Bajrang Dal. When I was younger, I was fitter and I was naughtier. So anyway, during those days, starting from childhood, I remember the days when we were made to sit on the building terrace, and Atalji used to come in his orange color kurta. He was a young man then, and with a 60-watt bulb. Today we have 5-star hotels. With a 60-watt bulb, Atalji used to give his speeches, and there was you could hear a pin drop silence there in Mumbai. I had a lot of effect of him. I've learned a few things from him. The topmost being very direct, very upfront, and very honest in whatever I do. Went to New Zealand about 12 years ago, and over there, then Agla denge, please. Over there, what happened was that I came in contact with a political party called New Zealand First. एक आगे कीजिए, और एक आगे कीजिए, और एक आगे, करते जाइए. ये रखिए. So I came in contact with a political leader called Winston Peters, the Right Honorable Winston Peters, in 2006. He has the reputation of being very direct, very honest, and very upright. But he also had the bad reputation of being a racist in those days. He had the reputation that he was anti-immigrant, and he didn't like Indians, he didn't like Chinese. So what happened was in 2006, early 2006, I attended a couple of public meetings of his. He was the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, and for a while he was the Treasury Minister. So I challenged him in a public meeting. That time I was not a part of his party. And I asked him, Mr. Peters, our people come here with a lot of money, with a lot of talent. We are the most qualified immigrants anywhere in the world. You go to other countries and you put that flag there, a banner there, clean, green, and safe New Zealand. My people come here. They invest their money in shops, in liquor shops, in grocery shops, in petrol pumps, what have you, farms. And what happens is that one shopkeeper has to keep his shop open till 9 o'clock, from 7 in the morning till 9 in the evening. It's a very quiet place, so only for the worth $20 to $30 that end of day business, they have to keep the shop open. 8:45, one goon comes there with a gun or a knife, shows the knife, and he's not shy to put it in the shopkeeper's stomach if the shopkeeper resists, and walks away with his money. It's not only money. There's a word called mana in Maori language. I have studied the language, just the basic ones. So not only his money is taken, his pride, his mana, which is man samman, as we say, the Maori say mana. His mana is taken from him. And what's the result? If the offender is caught, he gets about 2-3 months of community service, maybe 6 months of jail, if he's unlucky. And then he's back in the street doing the same job. Another shopkeeper, another victim. So how is New Zealand safe anymore? So he said, look, you have asked me a direct question, and the direct answer is that I have told this government, and he did, give us 750 more policemen in the streets, 250 backroom staff to support those 750 officers in uniform. So it says that's going to take time because those officers have to be recruited, they have to be trained, and then they have to be put on the streets. So I was satisfied with that answer. A couple of more times, and I questioned him on a couple of other policies of his. That there's an allegation. He's a lawyer. He used to have his own law firm. So there's an allegation against you that you don't like immigrants. So he said, well, that's not true. I said, look, skilled immigrants are a fact of life, whether you like it or not. No small country can run without skilled immigrants. 4.2 million population. How can you run a country without taking skilled immigrants? And most of us Indians are skilled immigrants. So I said, we can do without you. We can go to US, we can go to Canada, we can go to UK. Probably you can't do without us. So he started laughing. He's known to be a very hard-nosed politician, even called a bastard by some Indians. His reputation is the same as what Swargya Balasaheb Thackeray had earlier, that Balasaheb Thackeray is anti-Muslim. So similarly, he had the reputation that Right Honorable Winston Peters is actually anti-immigrant. So he started laughing, and then after the meeting, then we were having a cup of tea together, and he came to me. He didn't know me before that. He had just seen me in a couple of meetings. asking questions. And he liked the way I asked direct questions, sharp, short. So he says, what do you do for a living? So I said, I just refuse to die. So he got the humor in it. I said, what did you say? I said, I just refuse to die. That is how I live. So he says, are you affiliated to any political party? I said, not in New Zealand. So before that, I said, yes, I was. I was affiliated with and worked for Bharatiya Janata Party. So he said, look, there is no BJP here. Okay? So have a look at my policies. Go to my website, have a look at my policies. Study them. And next meeting when you come here, tell me what do you think of those policies. By next meeting, I had actually studied his policies and joined the party. This was in 2006. 2008, there was a message sent to me through one of his MPs, would you like to stand? So I said, well, I'm not ready for electoral politics yet. So thank you, but no thank you. So anyway, in 2008 elections, our party, New Zealand First, did not make the mark, which is 5% of, I'll come to that sooner. The 5% party vote we did not get. So the party was out of parliament from 2008 to 2011. Now in those 3 years, he was out of parliament and he was not used to it because he's been in the parliament for 25 years before that. He was actually a member of the National Party, which was the ruling party, and then because of his upfront attitude, he was sacked by the party, and then in 1996 he started his own party, which is New Zealand First, with the same principles as we have in BJP. That is, Hindustan is for Hindus. Okay, there's no doubt about that. Others are welcome to live here, but at the end of the day, this is our land, this is our country. So between 2008 and 2011, we ran a campaign called Bring Back Winston. Even the opposition felt that the parliament was very dull, very boring during those 3 years that Winston wasn't in the parliament. So 2011 elections, I was sent again another, he himself, we were having a Indian lunch in a friend's place called India Gate Restaurant. So in India Gate Restaurant, we were having lunch, and he said, look, did somebody ask you to stand last time? I said, somebody did. So he said, what happened then? I said, no, I wasn't ready. So he says, well, this time nobody's asking you. I'm telling you. So I stood for elections from his ticket in Mount Roskill area, which is known as Mini Mumbai, because there are many Indians in that area, Mount Roskill. So I stood from there, but however, because of the MMP system, the mixed membership proportionate system, the party got only 6.8% votes, and my number on the list was 21 in 2011. Obviously, I didn't make it to the parliament then. So, but I kept working for the party. Now, our party has had these policies of holding any government to account. We introduced a system called the Super Gold Card, which is a privilege card given to the senior citizens. If you are over 65 years of age, you get a Super Gold Card, which gives you the privilege of traveling for free in all modes of transport, which is the bus. You can take a bus, you can take a train during non-peak hours, you can take a ferry and go to a surrounding island and spend your day there, not a cent from your pocket, and come back before the hours finish. And some McDonald's also give you a free coffee if you are over 65 years of age. So now a little bit about MMP system. Now we don't have the FPP, which is first past the post, which is in our Bharat. We have a system called the MMP, where every voter has 2 votes, not 1. So you can actually vote twice. However, one vote goes to the candidate of, of your electorate or your constituency, and you can choose to vote for, give a party vote also. So it is not necessary that you have to vote for the same party that you have chosen the candidate from. So if you like the candidate, you can give your candidate vote to the candidate, and if you don't like his party, then you don't have to give your vote to his party or her party. You can give to the party that you like. So it's a beautiful system which is working now. And what happens is that minimum percentage of party vote that any party needs is 5%. So if your party gets 5% of votes, then you get 5% of representation in the parliament, which means that 5% of your MPs will belong to your party, even if they are not won a party electorate seat or a constituency seat. It is a complex system, but it is working beautifully for a small country like ours. So in 2014, 20th of September 2014 was the election. पिछली और बस ये रहने दीजिए. So 20th of September, between 2011 and 2014, I kept working hard with the community, and I must mention the huge support that I got from our ethnic media. Now that, the owner of that ethnic media, which is called the Indian Weekender newspaper, is sitting here, Mr. Giri Gupta. Please give him a hand. Mr. Gupta was the only Indian media owner who chose to support me. There are other Indian newspapers, but they were very shy. They didn't know that, oh, whether this man will make it to the parliament or he won't. Last time he stood, his number was 21. So if he's number 21 on the list again, then if he doesn't make it to the parliament, they were scared of the National Party, that whatever funding they get from them or whatever advertisement budgets they get from them will stop or will be reduced. But this gentleman here, he had the foresight. He said, you will make it this time. So thanks to him. Now, the Indian community came to know me better because of that single newspaper called the Indian Weekender. It's a free community newspaper. He is a businessman. He doesn't get a cent from that newspaper, and he doesn't spend a cent from that newspaper. Whatever income is there, that keeps the paper going, and towards the improvement quality of that newspaper. Anyways, by the grace of God and with the community support, I got my number this time in the party list was 11. And because of party vote, we took 11 MPs into the parliament. I was the 11th one. So I'm the lowest ranking member of parliament in our party. This is the first time, and then now what happened was that on 23rd of October was the swearing in. So I asked my leader, who was known to be a racist, I asked him, I said, I want to take oath on Gita. So he said, what is that? So I said, that's our Bible. That's my Bible. That's my scripture. And I am a Hindu from God knows how many centuries, because nobody has told me that any of my ancestors were not Hindus. So I'm a Hindu from the time humanity started. Nobody told me that I cannot be. And I'm very proud of that fact. So he says, now the man who has a reputation of being a racist, he said, well, you will take the oath on whatever you want. Just tell the parliamentary services to provide you a copy of Bhagavad Gita and give me one copy also, because I would like to read. So this was the first time that the Gita has gone to New Zealand Parliament. The other MPs who have been from Indian origin, but probably were shy or probably were not Hindus, because as of now, there has been a great divide between the Hindus and the Sikhs. The Sikhs no longer want to call themselves Hindus or offshoots of Hinduism. So none of them took oath on Gita. I very proudly took it. And I'm grateful to my leader that he supported me in that decision. He said, yeah, go for it. He said, nobody can deny you the right to take oath on whatever you like. And then Mr. Gupta played that good mischief. He put it in the newspapers that Gita goes to the parliament. So that was an article very well received by the 170,000 Indians in the country. आगे कीजिए please. और आगे कीजिए. So now the task ahead of us is that those who were shy, they have to realize that it's not a crime to be a Hindu. I got a message from another media owner, an editor of a newspaper, when he saw that I took oath on Gita, and he heard that I was making claims of being a Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh Karyakarta since the age of 14. So he says, look, I think you have to be more careful about what you write in the newspapers. I said, why is that? So he said, look, the Prime Minister has told me that he is very suspicious of RSS, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. I said, why is that? Is he mixing us with ISIS? Or what? So he said, no, he just, he says that dharm ko aap rajniti se alag rakhiye. This is an Indian editor of a newspaper giving me a message from the Prime Minister of the country. कह रहे हैं कि प्राइम मिनिस्टर चाहते हैं कि आप धर्म को आप राजनीति से अलग रखिए. मैंने उनको कहा कि मेरा कर्तव्य है कि अधर्म को राजनीति से अलग रखना चाहिए. प्रधानमंत्री कहते हैं कि धर्म को आप राजनीति से अलग रखिए, मैं कहता हूं कि अधर्म को राजनीति से अलग रखिए. और हमने जो काम करना है, हम अपने हिसाब से, अपने जो हमारा धर्म कहता है उसके हिसाब से करेंगे. हम we are not terrorists. He cannot stop the terrorist acts in Arab countries. And similarly, I am a Hindu. I will do what my dharma tells me to do. And if he can stop it, then he is killing democracy in the country. We are a direct democracy and we are proud of it. So that message went very well to the Prime Minister कि आप तो कहते हैं कि धर्म को आप राजनीति से अलग रखिए, हम कहते हैं कि आप धर्म को राजनीति से अलग रखिए. तो उसके बाद क्या हुआ कि my prominence went up because in spite of being from a small party, we are only 11 MPs in the party. And then the second thing was that our leader confronted the Indian community. We have a majority of Hindus in the country. The Sikhs, the Christians, and the Muslims are proportionally the lowest in numbers. We have the highest numbers. But yet, we are fragmented, we are divided. So when I went out asking for votes, asking for support, Mr. Gupta conveyed a simple message. Look at who is going to support Hinduism, who is going to support Hindutva in the country. And then think about it and then vote. So that actually was very, very effective. That most of the people who did not even know me voted for a party which was wrongly known to be a racist party. With the result that 11 of us went to the parliament. Now, growing up in Mumbai, there was a नारा और a वाक्य कहा जाता था तब कि हिंदू जागा है, देश जागेगा. अब वो समय आया है कि हमारी टेक्नोलॉजी, हमारा जो स्ट्रेंथ इतना बड़ा है इंटरनेशनली, अब वो समय आया है कि उसके नारे को कहना चाहिए कि हिंदू जागा है, विश्व जागेगा. नमस्कार.
Thank you, Mr. Bindra. Very, very insightful. Obviously, got to learn a lot about the New Zealand system of democracy. It's very, very interesting. I think it has some unique capabilities. and obviously really proud to hear that you stuck to your core beliefs. And I think that's a great example of what most people need to do, and that's what the topic has been since this afternoon and as we go forward. We're going to have our other speaker, Mr. Jagdish, come in here. He's going to talk about his experiences in another Western civilization, United States of America, and his political activism and how we can take it for initiation in terms of political activism. Jagdish.
My name is Jagdish Sevani, and I live in New York. I was born in Baroda. I did my mechanical engineering, and in '86, since '86, I am in New York. In USA, of course, Puri knows he's much more senior than me there, and he has been working a lot for the cause of US-India relationship. We have two parties there predominantly, Democratic and Republic. Now, in the recent election, what has happened, the president, that is Obama, is from Democratic Party, but the House is being ruled by Republican Party, both the Senate and Congress. And president is really we call him a lame duck president, because he cannot take any decision or whatever you can say, that last 2 years of his life. In USA, we are about 3.5 million strong Indians. And since last election, since Narendra Bhai has become the Prime Minister, I would say that Indian as a general, the respect, Indian has become more powerful. We had a big program of Narendra Bhai in Madison Square Garden about few weeks back, and there were about 18,000 people attended. And we have to refuse about 9,000 people. They were on the waiting list. After that, when the program was done, so, now Narendra Bhai known as there as a rock star. And after that, when I met the Secretary of State, John Kerry, who's like a foreign minister of USA, he said one thing to me. He said, Jagdish, what welcome you gave it to your Prime Minister in New York, we cannot give him. We cannot even think of giving him in Washington. We cannot. You did an amazing job. At this junction, the relationship between US and India is very, very important, and we can see the difference. The business lobby wants to have a strong relationship with India. They think that there is a business worth at least $500 billion next to be done with India in next 10 years. So the business lobby, the Fortune 500 companies in USA, they are pro-India. I would say they are pro-BJP. In US Congress, we have an India caucus. And out of 534 members, there are almost 300 members are of India caucus. Even Senate, we have more than 40 members of India caucus. So we are at a junction where we are at a at a point where everybody is looking at us. They want to have a good relationship with India. I think, Puriji, what we'll do, we'll continue this session with a question answer. That'll be more interactive, and you can share more about the relationship. You can talk about it. I think that'll be a good idea. Dhanyawad. Namaskar.
Thank you, Jagdish. As he said that, we don't want to make this about US and New Zealand. There are a lot of other Western countries. Unfortunately, a couple of our speakers from other parts of the Western side are not here. But I can just relay a few of my experiences having worked about 12 years. Unlike Mr. Bindra, I'm not running for offices. We have a political organization there. We have large, we have 3 million Indians, people of Indian origin in the United States. It's probably the largest anywhere in the world. So we have that advantage. It's a very affluent community. And like I always say that the Indian community is successful because they are all type A. It's hard to kind of get them together on a single cause because there are, firstly there's divisions from where you come from, whether you're Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, wherever. Then you are divided by the profession you are in, whether you are in technology or you're motel or doctors, etc. But I think there are some causes, as Jagdish pointed out when Mr. Modi came in, the community actually really came together. And they all came together. And before that, I can tell you there was another incident, which was the US-India Civil Nuclear Agreement, which we worked on extensively, where the community really, when the Indian community comes together in the United States, you call it the Indian community, Hindu community, etc. But anyway, my point is, they're unstoppable, the political force. And the newspapers and the people they write, they call us, our organizations, the India lobby. They say it's the second most powerful lobby after the Jewish lobby. Now that might be an oversimplification, but when we put our energies together, given our affluence, given the rising numbers that we have, and now the growth, think about it, we have 2 governors of Indian origin there. Governors are like chief ministers here. And these are powerful governors. Nikki Haley was just recently here. She got re-elected. And then we have Bobby Jindal. We have one member of Congress, and we have many state legislators. So you see that visibility coming together. And I think it's really a testament to the second generation of what is happening. The first generation, people who came in were really hesitant about getting into politics because their idea of politics was a little bit different. In India, it's messy, it's complicated, and they were all busy building their homes. I commend Mr. Bindra that he went there and quickly became an MP. Usually, maybe he was independently wealthy, but in India, in the United States, people go there first, they make money, they build their homes, their cars, they put money together for their children, and then their children do politics. That's generally how it happens. But we are beginning to see a lot of that happen. He talked about the India caucus, which is a big force. And I think it has been a big force in terms of the US-India relationship. The Indian-American community, as we call it, the hyphenated Indian-American community has been a real force in terms of bridging the gaps. Think about the time we had sanctions after the nuclear tests in India. And today, when the Prime Minister Modi came in, as he said, he was given a rock star reception. He was walking on the Martin Luther King Peace Memorial with President Obama, which just sometimes boggles my mind. A year ago, they were not giving him a visa, and then a year later, they're walking down the civil rights leader. So I can't understand American foreign policy at times, but that's a separate issue. But I think what the perspective is that if the Indian community comes together, it is really a force to be reckoned with, a force for good. And that's what I say to people. They ask me, why are you always pushing for US-India relationship? I say I push it because it's good for United States and it's good for India. I don't push it because I'm disloyal to United States. I push it because India is a big market for United States. India is the only stable democracy in this region, and there is no better friend United States can have, and we share values, democracy, rule of law, capitalism. So having said all of that, you've heard from all of us now. It would be helpful to get questions, or if you have some perspective. The idea is please keep it short because we want to get as many people in this dialogue. If you have long perspectives, I would encourage you after the session, Mr. Bindra is all yours for the rest of the evening. I've given him my Wi-Fi, so he owes me that much. Just kidding. So, questions?
Personally witnessed the growth of a Hindu lobby in America. In 1993, I was in Washington, D.C., and together with a Hindu leader there, Mr. Tiwari, we visited the fabled Jewish lobby, the APEC, American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. And, at that time it was still all very tentative and confused and so on. And so, it's a big contrast with the Jewish lobby, which is very focused, very passionate, that really knows what it wants. But, over the years, this has come together. And, perhaps the confused beginning is now becoming a force, on the side of the Hindus. And so, I'm, as far as I can tell, they really are becoming a very powerful lobby. In America, at least, this has succeeded, as opposed to a place I know rather better, like the United Kingdom, where on the contrary, you know, I see a lot of confusion and ineffectiveness and a great bit of aggression on the other side. You know, like there is this bill passed in parliament uh, condemning caste and condemning Hinduism, you know, piloted by Christian, you know, interest groups. So in the case of America, apparently Hindus have, you know, crossed that critical threshold and become really effective.
Jagdish, what
That's
do you
just
think?
my impression.
Yeah, I think we are about 3.5 million strong Indian. Most of us are, of course, Hindu, and I would say we are a political force to reckon with. The only weakness is we are not united together. We are not together. We do it, you know, एक group ने ऐसा किया, दूसरे group ने ऐसा किया. We don't work it unitedly. That's the weak point, I would say.
In the case of America, far more than what we heard in the earlier session, Trinidad and South Africa and so on, in the case of America, you also have to deal with a very powerful Indian anti-Indian lobby. You know, all these Indian secularists that have found a place in American academe, you know, they exert a lot of influence. Like the veto against the visa for Modi was entirely their doing. You see, American politicians don't care about India. You know, I mean, many Hindus have this idea, which I consider a little bit paranoid, that the whole world has it in for India, that they are against India and that they want to get Indians and so on. The truth is that the whole world doesn't care a bit about India. And, you know, it is mainly Indian-born people in America who have pressured the politicians to take action against Modi. And so, you know, this is still a force to reckon with, though my question to you is, do you have the impression that now with the changed power equation in India, this force is waning?
Would you like to say? Yes, this force, the way Modi was received in New York and DC, you can see that it's a thing of past. And even when his visa was refused, off the record, the senators and congressmen were telling me that they are for Narendra Modi to get the visa. And we were not really pursuing it. Otherwise, he would have got the visa. And now the rest is history, you know. Like he said, going out with Obama and the Martin Luther King. So the way the Prime Minister Narendra Modi was received in Washington, D.C., I don't think any other world leaders was received.
Well, one thing I would add, just simply, is United States works on its economic interests. If India's economy is rising, United States is going to be a very important and strategic friend of India. Just like there is not a Chinese leader who would get his visa rejected in the United States, is there? Because there is a very strong economic tie-in. So while Mr. Modi was received very well, he has to deliver on the economy of India for the United States to really respect. Today it's about economic diplomacy rather than any other diplomacy, at least as far as the United States is concerned. I can tell you right now the euphoria is there, but when Manmohan Singh came in first during the nuclear deal, believe me, there was a lot of euphoria. They called Mr. Singh and Mr. Bush were best friends, so to speak. But that only lasted for a while. When the economy started going down, the United States wrote off India, unfortunately.
On that point, when you say U.S. works on its economic interests, and that's why it's kind of being friendly with Mr. Modi and all that. At the same time, it also supports our enemy nation right in the backyard. How do you explain that? And I mean, have you spent any thought on, you know, maybe lobbying against its most preferred ally in the war of terror?
Okay, well, I thought the topic was political initiation, but we can talk about Pakistan,
Yes.
the P
Yeah.
word that always comes up. I can just tell you from our organization, and I don't want to get really too much off the topic, this is something that we have worked for the past 12 years on. We put conditions on aid to Pakistan about 9 years ago. After 26/11, we brought over 1,000 Indian Americans to Capitol Hill, and we had a resolution passed. I had so many congressmen and senators call in to the president and saying something needs to get done. And there was really a lot of fear. But I can tell you now, firstly, the hyphenation between India and Pakistan has changed. It doesn't mean that if President Obama is going to come to India, he is to go to Pakistan. So that hyphenation has been delinked permanently with that what you do for India, you have to do for Pakistan. Secondly, they are now looking at Pakistan as a necessary, I mean, I say it as a necessary arrangement. But I can tell you, as the troops come out of Afghanistan, things are changing so dramatically for Pakistan, because the main reason that they needed Pakistan was for the land routes, for providing equipment to the troops out there. And that's about to go bye-bye for Pakistan, but also now it's also a worrisome thing for India to think about what's going to happen, because as the US presence goes, the US pressure goes. Right now the terrorism activity has been held down because of the US pressure. So it's a dual-edged sword. US will not provide aid, but then the US has no leverage left with Pakistan also. So just remember, it's a dual-edged sword here. So that's just the Pakistan thing. Hopefully we can get back to, because this will become a session on Pakistan.
Now, can I just
Fair enough.
Please.
can I just get back to the New Zealand perspective as far as New Zealand is concerned? Although we are a very small country, but our economy is so strong that we are a force to be reckoned with. Now, our Indian perspective, Indians are 4% of New Zealand population. Now, when I say Indian, which mainly means Hindus, we are 4% of the population. Our contribution to the GDP is 9%, which means that we are not only pulling our own weight, we are pulling twice the weight of an average Kiwi. And the government recognizes that fact. 4% of population, 9% contribution to GDP, and what's a percentage in terms of presence in the parliament? Just 3 of us. Just 3 MPs in 120. It's me, and there are 2 Indian MPs, MPs of Indian origin in the ruling National Party. I'm in one of the opposition parties. So we do need more Indians to come up and take active part in politics. Just stand up and get counted. That's all it takes. Stand up and get counted. That's what it needs. And I am encouraging Indian candidates from all parties. Doesn't matter whether they belong to my party or others. I encourage them to step up and step up to the plate. So that's where we are at the moment. Thank you.
Hanji.
As far as the Indo-US relations are concerned, it's necessary to recognize the fact that the first Prime Minister who really wanted to bring about a departure in Indo-US relations was Narasimha Rao. He knew the power of the Jewish lobby, its control of the media and all, and you may recall that he established diplomatic relations with Israel. And some of the best diplomats, Indian diplomats, were posted there, Sivasankara Menon, Ranjan Mathai and others. And I happened to have a long dialogue with Horace Alexander, the well-known specialist on international terrorism in the George Washington University. And he was speaking about how winning over the Jewish lobby has really opened up a new vista in the Indo-US relations. That is one. The second one is that fortunately for the Indian community in the United States, I think in terms of support to the Democrats and the Republicans, it is evenly divided. So even if there is a change of government, we are going to have a Republican president, perhaps the relations with India may improve rather than, because the sort of emphasis that a Democratic president lays on human rights and all, a Republican president may not. The third one emanates from your presentation, where you said what will govern Indo-US relations is economic diplomacy. Here, we stand not so favorably with China-US relations. US-China economic interdependence is so much that the United States cannot afford to have a foreign policy to the detriment of China. So the United States today speaks of a grand alliance of US, India, Japan, Australia, ASEAN and all against China. But that may not work because the Chinese economic influence is so deeply entrenched in the United States, and the Chinese investments in the United States. And therefore, we in India should look at the United States not with starry eyes, but from that. And the American hope that the Indian market will be open to Walmart and all, even the present BJP government will not agree to.
Okay, Mr. Bindra, first question.
So,
Chinese,
how do we compare? Well, we don't compare ourselves with anybody. Particularly, uh, we were rather a fragmented community. What has happened in the last 5 years now? I think Swamiji visited Oakland, and HOTA. We have an organization called HOTA there. HOTA is Hindu Organizations, Temples, and Associations in New Zealand. So there's this organization being formed by Swami Vivekanandji, and what we do is that we have a circulating sort of a project where either one temple or one of the Hindu organizations, it can be the Telugu Association, Maharashtra Mandal, it can be Punjab Association, it can be Gujarati Seva Mandal, whatever it is. So they host the HOTA meeting every year. It's quite a big and interesting event that takes place there. So that brings the entire Hindu community together, and that is where the awareness comes to people that at the end of the day we are Indians and we are Hindus. So that is how. But now there's not a lot of political mileage that is taken from HOTA. Had that been done, I think we would have been more MPs in the parliament, more Hindu MPs in the parliament. But we're working on that. As far as the Chinese are concerned, they don't have divisions like us. Like we have 25, 26 states. But Chinese are Chinese. So they identify as one. Now also because we are fragmented, our language is, Hindi is not really recognized by the New Zealand government, although they acknowledge that yes, Hindi is the fourth biggest language spoken in New Zealand after Samoan. It is English, it's English, Maori, and then Samoan, and then Hindi. And Chinese is about 6th or 7th place. But they have more influence in the policy making process of it. Although we are more in numbers, we are more in the parliament. But at the end of the day, when the National Party makes policies, it makes policies to suit Chinese rather than us.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be make much difference. Like Mr. Puri rightly pointed out, in US the economy, business people, the lobby is very strong. They play very important role.
Especially Chinese economic interdependence is far more than the Indian economy.
Definitely.
So the Chinese will have a greater club.
No, but if you look at other point, the US wants the counterbalance for China because they are so much, so they would like to have a good relationship with India rather than to have some counterbalance in future for China. That's the way we are looking at it.
well,
If we are going to follow a foreign policy,
There are other people.
just one second, because if we are going to follow a foreign policy based upon anti-Chinese attack, that is the greatest way to do that. Nobody will support it.
Any relevant questions, please?
okay. Who else? UAE.
Yeah, UAE. Bindraji was supported by his friend from the media.
Yes.
So don't you think that we should have also a channel or a television, newspaper, everything which supports our ideologies? As Hindus, we have a lot of spiritual channels, but not political, you know, where we can sort of get into the minds of the people more.
You're talking about UAE.
I'm talking about India
talking about
generally.
across.
Generally.
Is there an Indian channel in New Zealand?
Indian TV channel?
TV
you mean?
channel.
Yes, but
Mr.
that
Gupta, is there
that,
an Indian TV channel in New Zealand?
TV channels. We have 3 radio stations,
Yeah.
3 papers, and I brought a few copies if you want to have it.
I'm talking about India basically because I mean even New Zealand or Australia. My family is also in Australia. Australia, UAE, we all have Indian channels from India. So basically we should have more channels. Like business community should invest into more media channels and newspapers so that we can get into the minds of the people and try to sort of change their views.
Absolutely, yes. That is happening, and I am a result of that effort.
Yes, that's right. That's what I was telling.
Yes, but there should be more. I mean, one is not enough. Just one Hindu MP in a parliament of a country is not good enough.
All Indian channels come there. They give
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
But
that
we
was-
need, what I'm saying is that more pro-Hindu, political, not spiritual. Spiritual also, it can be added, but more political, basically.
Here, we try to tell positive. Positive means positive.
Yes,
About India and about Indians
correct.
from anywhere in the world, people of India.
True.
You can see in the last 6 years, we must have printed about 175 volumes. We have never written a negative article about any Indian. Or about
Well, kudos to
And
you, sir.
we-
I mean, you're doing a great job.
we
actually,
going-
for- yeah.
Yes, it is. Madam, going back to Dr. Bhagwat's speech this morning, he said that we need to be nirbhay. So that is that is the crux of the matter as far as we in New Zealand are concerned. Out of 3 Indian newspapers, only one was nirbhay. The other 2 actually, one was neutral, and the other one I actually was trying to persuade me to delete that RSS part.
Correct.
Says, oh, because the Prime Minister doesn't like the organization called Rashtriya Sevak Sangh. He thinks that it's an extremist organization of Hindus.
Exactly, yeah.
And I said that.
This is the picture even the Middle East used to have,
Yes.
or anywhere in the world. If you see Modi ji's this election, what happened, the win, what he had, was really not supported by media, but the social media.
Yes.
Basically, it was having a really, really good, support for BJP this time. The same way I feel that media also we should concentrate, because we don't have a channel of our own politically.
That needs to happen, madam. Yes,
Are you
thank
talking
you.
about India or?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Ji.
Probably the original people of New Zealand known as Maoris, am I right?
They are known as Maoris.
Now, how are the relations between Maoris and Britishers?
Let's not talk about Britishers because there are no Britishers in New Zealand. There are only New Zealanders. And let's talk about the Maori-Indian relationship. Okay?
Okay.
Now, there was a study made by a Maori social scientist, and she met me in an ethnic event. She told me there are 3,300 Maori of Indian origin. Yes, I have met a few of them. Our friend Dr. Gunamagesan actually organized an Indo-Maori Maori conference, where there are some Maoris with Indian surnames. They are Maori, but I have actually locked up a few. I used to be a jailer for 10 years. So I used to meet a lot of Maori offenders, Maori prisoners, who had surnames which sounded like Indian surnames. Particularly, there was one young Maori criminal sentenced to about 7 years, and I interviewed him when he walked into the prison, and his surname was Kuvarji. Kuvarji, Kuvarji. So I asked them, I said, where are you from? He said, from Northland, which means north of Auckland. So I said, how's your surname different from other Maori? I didn't want to offend him by saying that it's an Indian surname, because he probably wouldn't like it. But he very proudly said, my great-grandfather was Indian. So he married my great-grandmother, and then that's how my surname came to be Kuvarji, but I'm a Maori. But he did acknowledge that, yes, he had Indian ancestry. 3,300 Maori of Indian origin.
What is the total population of Maoris there? Are there more than the white New Zealanders? Now you said you don't want to call them Britishers, okay?
Yes.
New Zealanders.
Yes.
But they are originally Britishers, you can't deny that.
Yes, no, they are Europeans. Nobody can deny that, and they are called Pakeha in Maori language. So yes, the Maori are a minority. Yes, they were meant to be about 12% earlier, and some of them have got so diluted. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. Hello. Excuse me. Can we talk first? Yes, Maori actually have certain traditions which are very similar to our own traditions. Like we have, we worship particularly me as a Kshatriya. Every 15 days in a year, when there's a festival called, not really festival, but 2 weeks called Pitra Paksha. where I worship my ancestors. And on the 14th day, when is the Sarvapitri Amavasya, I still today, till date, I perform that Shraddha for all my ancestors. Similarly, Maori, when they make formal speeches on their cultural place, which is called a marae. Marae is pretty much like a temple. There are no how to say it. There's no puja performed there. However, when they speak, there's a lot of respect given to their ancestors. And when they speak formally, they started with tena koto, tena kato, katoa, which means sabhi ko namaskar, which includes people who have come and gone from here, which includes people who are visible to us, and it also includes people who are there, but they are not visible to us, which means they're ancestors. So those are the similarities between us as Hindus and Maori culture.
I think it's like Red Indians.
Let's get now. That's because we are running out of time. One last question. One last question.
You told that the electoral political system in New Zealand, that is two-vote system.
Yes.
And so, whether that is applicable for, if it is transferred on to India, it's possible to adopt?
We have great numbers here. In India, we are 1.2, is it 1.2 billion people that we have? Yeah. So over there, we have only 4.2 million. So as I joke with my colleagues in the parliament, I says, New Zealand population is 4.2 million. And I come from Mumbai, so I said, the population of Sion, the suburb where I lived, the population of Sion and Ghatkopar is put together, it's 4.2 million. So where is the population of just two suburbs in a city and the whole country? Area-wise, New Zealand is not small, but numbers-wise, we are very small. So at the moment, it is working for us there in New Zealand. I don't think I'm qualified to judge whether that system will work with us here in Bharat.
Great. One last question, because I know he's been very patient for the past two sessions.
My name is Captain Shivaji Mahatkar from Mumbai. Since this is a Hindu World Conference, I'll have the last word here. You see, for last many years, we have, as Hindus, been very, very nervous or scared to say we are Hindus. You know, it's almost like saying that I'm not secular, or so we've had this fear, and it is changing. I'm very, very happy to see that. And like Bhagwatji said, Nirbhay Hindu, and very rightly you pointed that out again. I think it's time, because, and there are a lot of pracharaks here who've been working for the RSS and have done extremely good work. What I'd like to say here is that in India today, a lot of people think that RSS is an extremist organization, and there are a lot of misconceptions, misnomers. I think that needs to be put across to the people, that needs to be taken to the people, that it is not an extremist organization, and we must be able to convey the true work of RSS, and it's been politically banned also sometimes, so I think the truth should come out, and that should help people propagate Hinduism, and Hinduism known for what it is. Thank you.
From my small perspective, from a very small country again, is that work is underway. In the last 4 years, I think Swamiji has visited us twice, which was a greatly welcome visit of his, and then organization of these all Hindu organizations under one flag, which was the HOTA, HOTA, Hindu organization and temples and associations. So our job now is, as members of parliament and as general public, it is our job to give that awareness to people, so that the awareness is not there yet, because otherwise the Prime Minister of a country would not have said, oh, why is he mentioning RSS? Rashtriya Seva Sangh. Because I have been a member of Rashtriya Seva Sangh since the age of 14, and I make no apologies for that.
Great. I think we've had a fantastic session. Mr. Bindra has taken us to New Zealand and back without catching a flight. I think I've got a pretty vivid view. Hopefully, I can actually visit him there. But thank you again, Mr. Bindra. And Jagdish, again, for enlightening me also in some respects, but especially to the audience in terms of, as they say, the oldest democracy in work, which is hopefully now seeing a renaissance in terms of the US-India relationship. And for some fantastic questions. We obviously can't address every question, but as I said, we'll lock the doors and you can ask any question, especially of Mr. Bindra as he wants, because he owes me one. I have a simple announcement to make. Swamiji came and told me that all the delegates should come to the convention hall at 6:30. There is a special session at 6:30 this evening after the break. So please come. There's a session planned for all of you. But we will convene again tomorrow in the morning, and we'll have a lot more for you to discuss, for you to interface. As hopefully some of you are seeing, I am telling you, I'm learning a lot from questions that you ask, from feedback that you give, and from our great panelists. So thank you again, and we'll see you tomorrow.